Hello and welcome. Well, it's not uncommon for many cultures around the world to practice postpartum rituals to help protect the mother and her well-being after she's given birth. Cultures include Indian, Chinese, Moroccan, Vietnamese, African, amongst many. Disappointingly, and by stark contrast, in the Western world, we tend to focus on the mother during her pregnancy, however, not as much post birth. No, whilst a mother is pregnant, she will have people doting on her, offering to open doors, carry things, of course, offer you a seat so you don't have to stand. We do all of that exciting stuff. We throw baby showers, we have prenatal checkups and classes, whilst, all of our friends and family are always eager to know almost on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly, depending who it is, if it's your mum, daily updates on how you're feeling. Now, post birth, a mum can be discharged from hospital within 24 to 48 hours for natural birth and up to 4 days for a C section. Now, if she's lucky, a partner will have paternity leave, but soon enough, you'll be left home to breastfeed and bottle feed, whatever you're deciding to do, and to recover from the birth, possibly before shortly having to return back to work. Bit of a stark contrast, huh? So, the question is, how can we adapt some of these traditional postpartum practices for our modern mamas? Well, lucky for us, today we're joined by our special guest, AmyPasfield, and she's here to share how we can create a nourishing and supportive postpartum experience for our modern mamas. Now, a little bit about our guest. Amy is a holistic nutritionist and postpartum doula, a mama to two beautiful girls, and the owner of Mother Unearthed, a holistic model of care for women to unearth the mother within by providing nutritional, emotional, and educational support in a time that women really need it the most. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, and in doing all of my prep for this interview today, it really sort of just become alarming to me how in the Western world, the way that we uh, I don't want to say treat a mother because that's the wrong word, but the way in contrast to other parts of the world where they really do support and admire the mother pre and post birth as opposed to here in the Western world, there is a massive contrast. And I just, many cultures around the world, I think have really got it right in how they prioritize new mums and the care and the well-being directly after they've given birth. In particular, many of these countries are low income and developing countries. However, it goes to show that money really isn't everything. So I'd love to know from your perspective, do you think that in the Western world that in this respect, with this subject, that we sort of have it a little bit wrong when it comes to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what really pushed me into the postpartum doula work is that I was just looking around me and seeing how many mothers were struggling really badly. And it wasn't until I discovered I was really struggling emotionally and physically myself that I looked into all these traditional practices, and it made me realize how much we are really disadvantaged in our Western culture, and
Mm,
how much we are really missing out on as mothers, and what's affecting us
yeah.
essentially.
And I mean, all of this stuff, as much as it is, some of it is anecdotal. A lot of it does actually anchor down to. Sorry, just let me just cough for a moment. So what happens when you have a coffee before a podcast? Um, that this all anchors down to studies and to research. So in preparing for the chat today, I found that a lot of studies have found that postpartum disorders such as postnatal depression in those countries where they do support the mother were virtually non-existent. So by contrast, 50 to up to 85% of new mums in the Western world experience the baby blues, and up to another 15 to 25% or more experience postpartum depression, which is exactly what you were just talking about, the fact that it is quite alarming to see what works and doesn't work. As I said, some of it's anecdotal, a lot of this is, I mean, with these studies actually do show, and we'll have the links in the show notes to some of these studies. So it's really no wonder that so many mums in the Western world find the postpartum period to be extremely stressful. So those
Mm.
numbers really speak volumes, don't you think?
Absolutely. We're living in a society that doesn't support her healing. And then as a result, she's not prioritizing it herself and then wondering why she's failing as a mother.
Yep.
In She's not failing, but she is not supported
Yep.
in the right way.
I think that's a very, very strong message to get out. It's about the support. Now,
Absolutely.
on that, I just wanted to acknowledge we published your article as one of our partners here at Kittypedia, and the article title is Traditional Postpartum Practices for the Modern Mama. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, please tell us what it's about, and of course, just tell us what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this article is about traditional postpartum practices, as you said, for a modern mama. So a lot of these postpartum practices aren't exactly realistic in a modern world, but I've kind of rejigged them and reinvented them to a way that we can still support ourselves in terms of a practical way and how we can ask for help and receive help, and what kind of plans we can put in place to be able to allow our bodies, our mind, spirit to heal after birth.
Yep.
And what inspired me to do this was that, yeah, as we mentioned before, modern mothers are struggling from the lack of societal support. So preparing mothers with this kind of knowledge, I feel, is essential to allow her to have a peaceful postpartum rather than like a chaotic and stressful and fatigued postpartum.
Yeah. I think it's worthwhile noting that, as we've just stated, many cultures recognize that the postpartum period and that time frame is very different to normal life. As a mother's body needs to recuperate and just to heal, and not just physically but mentally as well. So the support system and the village around her, so to speak, um, gives her, or should really give her, the support, allowing her to limit all activities and for her body to be able to do that. But this isn't always the case in the modern world, as we've just mentioned as well. So, in that, and in this, Western world that we live in, how can we gather our village of support as a modern mum then?
So unfortunately, we don't no longer coexist in villages anymore. That would allow the mother to automatically receive her tribe support. So the modern mother is also dealing with a society that praises her for being independent, but this is pushing her further away from the support that she needs as a mother. In order to have a good postpartum and gather her own modern version of a village, it doesn't just require planning and honouring these first 40 days. It also requires inner work on her behalf around allowing herself to receive. And so many mothers find this hard because we are taught to do everything on our own. And asking someone to do something for us that we're completely capable of doing on our own is a difficult process. So first and foremost is getting to know the reason why it feels hard to ask for help. And this can be it coming across as a sign of weakness, loss of perceived control, becoming
Crazy.
dependent, yeah, shame even, and not wanting to be perceived as not having it all together, which is really heartbreaking. And although many women are really longing for this support, we're subconsciously pushing it away, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, we can't receive and be in control at the same time, and that's really tricky for some people. But in allowing ourselves to receive, you open yourself up for emotional connection and support. So bringing back the village in a modern world, from my perspective, has required getting vulnerable and letting down my walls. It's also required getting out of my comfort zone. As an introvert myself, I find that really tricky. And acknowledging that your village doesn't have to be your family. It can also be friends who feel like family that you can welcome into your mess. My village, for example, was built through meeting women through prenatal classes, mothers groups, as well as exercise classes. And then it doesn't also have to be limited to in person. So we can also receive a lot of support through the internet now, via
Mm.
Facebook groups, apps, or even forums. Um, I personally live 3 hours away from my family, so creating my own village was essential, not only for my mental and physical health, but it allowed my children to develop their own social skills as well with the children in my own village.
And how
Yeah.
much of that did you do pre-birth to prepare for this, and how much did you do post-birth of creating your village around you?
Yeah. So first time around, zero. I had no idea what I was in store for. And I think that's exactly what's pushed me down this path.
Yeah.
I really struggled postnatally with my firstborn, and So it took me really, like, for example, I didn't turn up to my first Mother's Group class because I was so resistant of socializing and receiving help. Um, but then I ended up making the best friends I've ever had, and my children socialize with their children, and they've grown up together, and it's beautiful. In contrast to my second postpartum period, I was prepared and I made a plan about who I can call on for support, and I felt so rested and nourished and supported, and it was such a stark difference to what I experienced first time around.
So what's a key lesson in that, do you think, and the key message to someone listening to that
Yeah,
experience then?
absolutely. So a lot of first time mothers prioritize planning for birth. They need to create a postpartum plan. That is my number one key takeout for this, and that is
Yeah.
in terms of who you're going to call on for support, how you're going to keep your body nourished, how can you support your body healing, important contacts even to call on, and yeah.
Do all of that work pre-birth and whilst you're in pregnancy, and for your first baby, as opposed to just sort of getting to your postpartum period and realizing that you need the support. So to be proactive in that respect, because the
Yeah,
postpartum period, as we've just mentioned, is really a time for a mum to rest. So you don't want to be running around and organizing these things. It's
yeah,
the time there is for you to care for your baby and for you to regain your strength. Um, and in other thing is too, in many Western, sort of cultures, as well, mums are expected on top of that, whilst her body should be, resting and recuperating, she's also expected to entertain family and friends, and sometimes even during the hospital stay. And that's just, all family and friends, meanwhile, of course, they're excited for the baby's arrival and to meet the baby and to welcome the baby into the family and just our friendship circles and just the world in general. But with that, I think family just need to be a little bit more empathetic. And I think it's, we really wear that badge of honor, as you were just saying earlier on, that mums find it very hard to ask for help. And I just think because we just have this culture that it's really about, well, it's admired to be busy and it's admired to be strong, but that's not necessarily the right thing. And I think equally on the flip side, family and friends should consider really showing some empathy and some support in that regard. So I wanted to ask, why do you think the seclusion is so important also?
so the postpartum resting period is a ritual that's practiced in cultures around the world, and for those that haven't heard of this practice, it's a set period of confinement in which a woman remains at home focusing on her healing and bonding with her baby. Now, nearly every traditional culture worldwide practices this, as you mentioned, except for Western society. And they emphasize a period of rest, recuperation, and care for the new mother following the birth of her baby. She wouldn't attend to any household tasks such as washing, cooking, and childcare. I know that sounds so luxurious as a modern mother. She would keep warm, having nutritious food cooked and fed to her, and massage and belly binding sometimes daily.
Mhm.
These women were also surrounded after birth with support, given healing teas and broths, and offered the best from her family and community with quality rest and nourishing foods. The relevance of the first 40 days is that around the 6-week mark, the mother has usually stopped bleeding, breastfeeding is established, and as long as she's well rested, nourished, and has reasonably complication free birth, she's starting to regain her energy as well. So retreating to the confinement of her space will allow her body to heal and recover at its own rate. That's the number one thing. The birth experience itself has a huge impact on the physical body, with fluid and blood loss and enormous energy expenditure in the case of a C-section, recovery from a major abdominal surgery. It also allows her to bond and learn about her baby without the interference of the outside world, because we really do deal with a lot of unsolicited advice in modern world. So allowing her to trust her intuition is a really big thing about retreating. It allows her to reserve her energy, for looking after herself and her baby. It allows her to reconnect with her mind, body, and spirit after birth. And giving birth is also profound stress on the body and almost a superhuman feat. that leaves us really nutritionally depleted and in need of replenishment. So nourishing her body after birth, it will allow her to, it will allow herself to nourish her body after birth.
Mm-hmm.
A cared for mother allows her to sustain her baby and the vitality for an enriching motherhood experience. So instead of a really depleted, chaotic experience, she could potentially be thriving and energetic, which is the aim of the game.
Yeah. So, I mean, how else can practicing that 40 days of confinement after birth help heal the body? Is there anything else? And maybe could you maybe speak to maybe just the 40 days and why that's so important? Just
Yeah,
expanding on that
absolutely.
a little bit more.
Yeah, so as mentioned before, she's likely stopped bleeding around that
Yep.
point as well. So her uterus, there was a few years ago, there was something circulating on social media about a placenta wound. So if you have seen it, it's like the size of a dinner plate. When the placenta detaches, it leaves a massive wound. So allowing her body to rest in that time would allow that to heal completely, properly. And it is just an example of, for example, you would see a athlete recovering properly after a marathon, whereas a mother doesn't allow herself that kind of time after a massive wound has occurred to her body.
Mm-hmm.
It also allows her to establish her breastfeeding, as mentioned as well, because if she's stressed and she's running around, running errands, cleaning up after everyone, she's likely going to not produce enough oxytocin, so she won't be able to have a decent milk supply.
On this topic, then, mothers during this period of time are really quite vulnerable. So, do you think that this is something that they really should be recognised for?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a saying that goes around that when a baby is born, so is a mother. And so we need to start treating our mothers as just as sensitive and vulnerable as our babies. They are going through such a massive hormonal, emotional shift,
Yeah.
um, that they need this support. They need to be held. They need to be nourished and looked after the way that they look after babies. But we
Yeah.
are not encouraging that. Yeah. So that's a big thing for this period of confinement for sure.
So, what are some other realistic ways that a modern mum can support her healing? The article lists a few of those ways, and I'd love to briefly talk through some of them with you. The first one is prioritizing your health and feeding your baby. So, by the looks of things, we have to stop praising women for getting back to normal life like it's some form of an achievement. And like I was just saying earlier, it's a badge of honor to be strong and to be busy and to be like that person, as your article states. Oh, you've already done this and you've already done that, and well done to you. If anything, that's almost the worst thing that we can be encouraging, I guess, those behaviors, because it is really detrimental to a woman's ability to heal both mentally and physically, as you just said. So, yeah, could you maybe just expand on this a little bit more?
Yeah, so prioritizing her healing can also fall into the category of the inner work that I mentioned before, because she may
Mm-hmm.
find it difficult to prioritize that. So if we put in that section that prioritizing feeding your baby, she may actually make that a priority. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's so common to see new mums just jumping into it, and it's really detrimental to her health. And she needs to just embrace the stillness to learn to feed her baby, um, and praise for things that are superhuman, like just
Yeah,
giving birth to an entire human.
I
That
know.
is amazing.
Well, so what I'm hearing you say is not to fall straight into your old routine of food shopping and running errands and all of that sort of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, so that would be something that I would organize in a postpartum plan as well. So you could do things like organizing a meal train at your baby shower, or mama blessing. You can organize, organize support in terms of cooking, so nourishing meals made by a support person. Supplying mum with warm, delicious food will allow her to increase her milk supply, build her blood, and strengthen and heal her body after a long pregnancy and childbirth. Um, so practically there are a few key areas that every mother will need assistance with, especially in the immediate postpartum. Cleaning is another one. A
Yep.
clean space will allow her some calm within the postpartum period, because household chores are the last thing you feel like doing after you've just given birth. So writing up a list of things that guests can help you with, e.g. like hanging out the washing, doing the dishes, the vacuuming. It can be quite confronting for a lot of mamas to ask for this kind of help. So it can be practical and easy to write up a list and put it on the fridge, for example, for anyone you trust to be in your space. Childcare is another great practical tip. So if you have any other children, it could be hard for you to focus your full attention on your newborn baby. So having someone to help with your children will allow the older kids to adjust to the situation easier as well. So your support person will be able to do school drop-offs, entertain while you rest, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
Companionship is another big one. So a
Yeah.
mum can often feel lonely in the postpartum period. So having a support person to check in on you while you will give her an opportunity for conversation and connection, especially while she's feeling very vulnerable and sensitive and hormonal. And the last one is baby care. So being attached to baby 24/7 can often leave her feeling drained. So asking a support person to watch baby while you have a nap or have a bath or a shower, or if you just need a break from changing nappies, would really help her.
Yeah.
On a physical level, what she can do to support her healing after birth is the 40 days of confinement, as mentioned before. She can stay warm. So this is what was mentioned in the article as well. So a common postpartum practices across the world for many reasons, but a mother is considered to be cold after birth. So keeping a mother warm after birth is considered just as essential as keeping her baby warm. It's common belief that her support team would create many nurturing practices to keep her warm, including warm baths, massages, blankets to increase circulation and to bring healing heat to all parts of the body. So to do this in a modern world, there are many ways to keep her warm, but the common traditional heat treatments would be nourishing meals, which is my favorite, some massages with warm oil, and keeping inside out of the wind, which is a really simple one to do, and not going out with wet hair. And belly binding is another great way that she can support her postpartum healing. So in traditional postpartum cultures, the binding of a mother's belly was considered essential to allow her abdomen to return to normal size, and it would allow her organs to shift back to the normal positions as well. It would aid digestion and posture, and it also makes her feel held as well. So I feel like that is a massive point to note as well, because a mother likes to be supported, I guess. And so
so just to reiterate those points, so organised support, mums aren't meant to do this alone is what I'm hearing. I understand every mum is different. However, everyone could always do with some organised support, especially during this postpartum period. So it's just a matter of knowing what you can ask and who you can ask help. And like you said, who you're comfortable having in your space, but organized support is something that always can be organized, using that word again, but sort of pre-birth, of course. So and organizing these things during something like a baby shower is the perfect time. Staying warm, so warm nourishing meals, massages with warm oil, and obviously, as you just said, not going out with wet hair. I find that quite interesting, but it does make sense that as a mother's body is healing, it needs all of the energy that it can. So it's going to take that energy, and the energy for keeping her body warm isn't going to be there as much. So really great point about keeping her body warm. And the belly binding. So the relevant part of that is investing in some really good compression recovery shorts or compression wear, which there's many on the market to help realign the uterus and just support the belly after birth. So there's so many benefits in compression recovery wear as well, but that's something. And I do find it just so fascinating how the human body works, that all of the organs have to move to be able to make way for the baby in the body. And of course, those organs have to go back where where they
Yeah.
originally were from. So of course, as that's happening, recovery shorts can really help. Oh, shorts and or any other sort of compression wear. But as you mentioned, your favorite was the nourishing comfort food. Things like lactation cookies, a great way to help also build milk supply. And I find it really interesting what you were writing about. So warm food that is easy to digest as well.
Yes.
Things like soups and stews and rice puddings. Could you maybe just because it's good to remember that a mother's digestion isn't always isn't going to be very fast as her organs are shifting back, as we were just saying. So can you maybe just expand on that and why those particular foods are much more beneficial for a mum during this period?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's number one thing for what she should be eating after birth is definitely easy to digest. So her organs have been squished into tiny little places while her baby has been growing, and after birth they're all trying to shift back to their normal spot. And that is why after birth they encourage you to get your bowels moving again before you leave to go home, to allow your digestion to go back to normal essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, some examples like you said, rice pudding, stews and soups, and these can all be things that can be cooked ahead of time, chucked in the freezer, or you can just put them in the slow cooker even, and that allows it to break down and doesn't force your body to break down all this really tricky food but
For
still
the
get all the
body to have
nourishment.
to do the work. You've done the work
Yeah,
for it.
absolutely. And it's all delicious as well. So it's win-win. Yeah. So that
Awesome.
again can be organized in a meal train or meal delivery service even. There is beautiful options out there now that are for specifically for mothers, postpartum meal delivery service. So we are slowly learning what a mum needs after birth.
Yes. Slowly, slowly. Well, look, this has been a really insightful chat today, and hopefully really helpful for lots of people watching and listening. So, for all of those beautiful people, how would you summarize your key messages and what would you like them to take away from our chat today?
So my key messages would be number one, realize that your support network does not need to be your family. You are able to call in help through local mothers groups, exercise classes, whatnot, even support forums online, and to know that there are ways to support your healing after birth that doesn't encourage you to run errands and do absolutely everything on your own. You do not, and you are not meant to mother on your own, and it's not going to support your motherhood journey. So
Yeah,
yeah, you can thrive in motherhood.
absolutely. And it is worthwhile for us to understand that these countries um, that we were just mentioning at the start, that their rates of postnatal depression and baby blues are significantly. I mean, there's no comparison between the two. I mean, their stats are virtually non-existent compared to what we have here in the Western world. So, if that's not enough for people to consider why a mother needs this support, I don't know what else that we really could say. So, just for us to be understanding and supportive, uh, of a mother during this time. And I found it interesting in just the research I was doing yesterday. In some of these African countries, they really support the mother. Like they one particular village and culture. They have her for a 3 month period in the hut and everything else where she is recuperating. And when she sort of walks out of that area, they give her like a bead made tiara, and they chant and they have songs and music, and that really is just to give you goosebumps
Yeah.
thinking about it, because you have to think what a mother's body actually does, and I don't think we celebrate and yeah, just celebrate it enough. So I'm so grateful for all the information you've shared today. If people have questions for you and want to reach out and know more about Mother Unearthed as well, whereabouts can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I connect with most of my audience via Instagram, which is mother_unearthed, or you can connect with me at my website, which is www.motherunearthed.com. Or you
Awesome.
can check me out on Facebook, which is also Mother on Earth as well.
All right. We'll have all of those handles in the show notes, as well as a link to your article and just some of those studies. So you know that I'm not making all of this stuff up, that it's actual fact, it's real. And of course, if you've got any questions, I can reach out to you anytime. Thanks, Amy. And really look forward to chatting with you again in the future. And until then, take care.
Thank you for having me.
All right, bye.